Masechet Ketubot Daf Samech. We are dealing with a fascinating topic regarding nursing, a wife's obligation to nurse her children, and we're going to get to an interesting question of is human milk kosher? Since human beings are not kosher, and usually milk from a non-kosher animal is also not kosher, so why should human milk be kosher? From there we'll talk about human blood and lots of other interesting topics. So we begin, Imhaya Makira. Braita mentioned that a woman has, the Mishnah mentioned that a woman has an obligation to nurse her children. That's part of the basic obligations of a wife to her husband. However, if they get divorced, then the woman no longer has an obligation. The man has an obligation to provide for all of the family, for his children. So it's his problem. And therefore, he would have to hire a wet nurse to nurse the child. However, the Braita adds that if the baby recognizes the mother and would not want to nurse from a foreign woman, then the husband has to pay his ex-wife a salary to nurse their child. Okay, good. So now we ask about that. Ad kama. How old is a child usually have to be that he would recognize his mother? The older, the more chance that he will recognize his mother and not want to nurse from someone else. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, Amar Rav, Shelosha Chodashim. So Rav says 3 months. Ushmuel Amar Sheloshim Yom, 30 days. This statement of Shemuel, there are manuscripts where it's, instead of the name of Shemuel, it says Rav Yehuda Amar Shemuel. You see, that's only in 2 manuscripts, Munich and the Furkovich manuscript. In other ones, it just says Shemuel. This is going to be important in a minute. So either 3 months or 30 days. Rabbi Yitzchak Amar Rabbi Yochanan 50 yom. He said, Rabbi Yochanan from Eretz Yisrael says 50 days. Now, Amar Rav Shimi bar Abaye halacha Rabbi Yitzchak shamar mishum Rabbi Yochanan. He says halacha is 50 days. Bishlama Rav Rabbi Yochanan kol had vechad ki churpeh. Now we understand the one that said the longer amounts, either 3 months or 50 days, and each child would be according to its intelligence. Some are a little quicker, and already in 50 days they recognize their mother. Some it takes them more time. It may take up to 30 days. 3 months. And so actually there's not necessarily a machloket here. They're just talking about the different stages. Different children develop differently, and so this would be a quicker kid or a slower kid. But Shemuel, who says 30 days, did you ever see a baby that already in 1 month recognizes its mother and would refuse to nurse from another woman? That seems too young. Ki ata Rami bar Yechezkel amar lo tesayetinu lehani kilale dechayil Yehuda achi mishemed Shmuel. So when Rami bar Yechezkel came, he said, do not listen, do not pay attention to the rules that my brother Yehuda said in the name of Shemuel. So Rami bar Yechezkel was brothers with Yehuda bar Yechezkel. Yehuda is the famous Rav Yehuda, 2nd generation Amora, who is constantly quoting both Rav and Shemuel. He was a student of both of them. So Rami, his brother, was also a sage in his own right, says, don't listen to my brother's tradition in the name of Shemuel. You see, that's why it was important that in those 2 manuscripts, it says here, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shemuel. So this statement was said in the name by Rav Yehuda. Rami says that was an incorrect statement, and Shemuel did not say that because it doesn't make sense. We don't find infants that already recognize their mother after 30 days. Rather, he fixes it. It could be that those 2 manuscripts that have it added in Rav Yehuda because of this statement now later, that now we see that was said by Rav Yehuda, even though the other manuscripts don't have it. So according to those, we just have to infer, even though it didn't say any tradent, we can infer from here that it was Rav Yehuda. Okay, anyway, Rami bar Yechezkel says in the name of Shemuel, Hachi amar Shemuel, kol zman shemakira, as long as the infant recognizes her. So it's not any fixed age. He's not going to go by some kind of average at the others, or maximum or minimum. He says whenever it is, you have to do a test and check to see if the baby recognizes its mother. If it does, then the husband can pay her, and also force her to take care of the child. Otherwise, the child will be in danger. There was a divorcee that came to Shemuel, and she did not want to nurse her son. So, Amar le Rav Dimi bar Yosef. Zil bedaka. So Shemuel told Rav Dimi bar Yosef, go and check to see if the infant recognizes its mother. If it doesn't, then she's off the hook, and the father will have to go and find someone. Azal otba bedade denashe ushkale libra v'kamader le alayu. So they did a kind of a lineup, not to find who the criminal is, but to see if the baby would recognize the mother. So he went and put the mother in a row of other women, and took the child. The Rav Dimi took the child in his arms and placed it on the lap of each woman in turn to see what the baby's reaction would be. When it came to its mother, the child turned and looked at the mother with joy, obviously recognized its own mother. The mother averted her eyes from the baby because she didn't want to nurse him, and so did not want to be recognized, but that didn't work. Amar la netaf aynaich kum deri berich. And so the rabbi said, you lift up your eyes and take your son and go and nurse him, right? Obviously, this baby does recognize you. This Aramaic, kum deri berich, happens to also be the Aramaic translation of kumi si'i et hana'ar, which the angel tells Hagar when it says, you're going to be all right, and here's a well of water, go and pick up the child Ishmael, and he's going to live, he's going to be fine. And this is after Hagar gave up hope and abandoned her son under a bush. So it's interesting that it uses those exact words. The rabbi used those exact words. Could be he was making a reference, just like Hagar tried to abandon her baby, but did not in the end. So too, you tried to abandon your baby, but you may not. Okay, so now Soma Menayada. We have a question. How does a blind baby know its mother? Over here, it says the baby saw his mother and recognized her face. But what if it's a blind baby? Amar Rav Ashe bereha ubeta'ama. Even a blind baby knows its mother through smell and taste, which I do believe is scientifically true, that babies can smell and taste the mother's milk and recognize it. Teno Rabbanan yonek tinok veholech ad esrim ve'arba chodesh. Okay, a related braita that says that a child is allowed to continue nursing for 24 months. But after 24 months, it's like nursing from a non-kosher animal. In other words, human beings are somewhere in between kosher and non-kosher. If they were totally not kosher, you would not be able to, even though a child, we don't stop them from, you don't have to stop them from eating not kosher, but we don't feed them not kosher. But here, you can feed a child human milk, obviously. So it's not quite the same exactly as eating from a non-kosher animal. But it'd be Eliezer giving a time limit. For 2 years, that's permitted, it's fine, it's kosher. But once the kid is over 2 years, they don't need their mother's milk anymore. They can eat regular food, and therefore one should stop, and it's similar to eating from a non-kosher animal. Rabbi Yoshua omer afilu 4 ו5 שנים, פירש לאחר 24 חודש, חזר וחזר כיונק שרץ. Rabbi Yoshua says, no, you don't have to stop. Sometimes mothers want to continue nursing, and you can continue even for 4 or 5 years. That's totally fine. However, if she nursed for 24 months or more and stopped, then she may not start again nursing that child. So within 24 months, she can start. Even if she takes a break, she can go back. That's fine. But once 24 months comes and she takes a break and stops, then the baby's on her own. You can't return a nurse. That would be like having milk from a non-kosher animal. So Rabbi Yoshua is more lenient. Amar Mor, mikan ve'elach yonek sheres. So we're going to quote this part of the Braita that says it's like taking from a non-kosher animal. Urmini, we have a challenge to this. Yachol yeh chaleb mehaleche shetayim tameh. So this is a Braita, comes from a Midrash Halacha, that asks, can it be that milk from a biped, meaning referring to human beings, is milk from a human being tameh, meaning not kosher? Can it be? Now there is a kal vachomer that we're going to quote that would seem to say yes, the human milk should be not kosher, but then we're going to quote a pasuk that is going to argue that actually it is kosher. So while you just said here that it's like from not kosher, but the following Braita is going to argue that human milk is kosher. So let's see. Vedinhu. Now here's the kal vachomer that's going to prove that human milk would not be kosher. Regarding an animal where we are lenient regarding tum'ah of touching it. There's a rule that any animal that's a live animal is not tameh, does not receive tum'ah, does not impart tum'ah. Where even though it's meat, the flesh and milk of a non-kosher animal is prohibited. So we're stringent on that. Now, let's compare that to a human being. Adam, shechmarta b'maga'ah. A human being is more tameh in that a live human being can contract tum'ah, can impart tum'ah. So a human being is more tame'able than a live animal. And odin shetachmir b'chalabo. So all the more so we should be more stringent regarding the milk from a human. This kal vachomer is interesting because it's interchanging two different definitions of tameh. The word tameh in the Torah, sometimes it means an animal that's tameh, meaning not kosher, and sometimes it means ritual impurity. If you're impure like that, you can't go to the Beit HaMikdash and eat terumah. So these are actually two completely different definitions of tum'ah. Even if you touch a pig, you still don't become tameh. Even if you eat a pig, you wouldn't become, that is a tameh animal, and that's prohibited, but one would not become tameh, ritually impure. You wouldn't have to go to the mikveh after. So, but nevertheless, since it's the same word, we're making such a kal vachomer to learn that it seems human milk should be prohibited. Therefore, Talmud Omar et gamal ki ma'ale gerahu hu tameh ve'en halab mehaleche shetayim tameh ela tahor. We're going to learn from this pasuk regarding a non-kosher animal. We can see the pasuk inside here in Vayikra. It says, this is what you should not eat from anything that either chooses cud or has true hooves, meaning it has one or the other. So one of the animals that has only one, a camel does chew its cud, but it does not have a split hoof. So therefore, tamehu lachem, it is not kosher. So notice it says the word hu actually twice, ki maleh gerahu, and then it says tamehu lachem. And hu is a limiting word. It's saying this is prohibited, but we can infer from this that there is something else that is similar but is permitted. And so what is that something else? So it means this is tameh, and the rabbis learned from, since it says both here and in Devarim, that this animal is not kosher, we can infer that both the flesh and the milk is not kosher. Fine. So for a camel, we know that its flesh and its milk is not kosher, but the limiting word says only its milk is not kosher, but the milk of another being, which is a biped, a human being, is tahor. So from this we learn that human milk is kosher. And it continues, Yachol osi et halab she'eno shaveh bakol velo osi et hadam shehu shaveh bakol. Now what about human blood? I might think that maybe the limiting word hu is only permitting human milk, which is not does not apply to everyone, because only women produce milk, not men, and perhaps I would not exclude human blood, which is prohibited by all human blood, all humans have blood, and therefore is prohibited across the board. So I might think that since blood has a stringency that milk does not, that human milk is permitted, but human blood should be not permitted. Talmud Omar, hu tameh, ve'en dam mehaleche shetayim tameh ela tahor. So that's why it says the word hu. This could be referring to the second hu in that pasuk, which is a further limiting word to teach me that only the blood of a camel is prohibited and other non-kosher animals, but the blood of a human being is actually kosher, which is very interesting. Another interpretation of this line that milk is not across the board but blood is regarding kosher animals. Regarding kosher animals, their milk is permitted, whereas blood is prohibited not only for non-kosher animals. The blood of kosher animals is also not allowed. That's why we have to salt the meat if we're going to cook it. Okay, so that's so this kal vachomer is interesting because this means that not only milk but also blood of a human being is permitted. So if you ask, what about the flesh of a human being? I mean, how could is the flesh considered prohibited like a non-kosher animal? Is a human being considered like a non-kosher animal since we don't chew our cud and have split hooves? If so, if a human being is the same as a non-kosher animal, then really the blood and milk should also be prohibited. The commentaries offer different theories about what would be the prohibition against eating human flesh. Some would say related to Ever Minachai or desecrating the body. Rambam has a very interesting halacha that a human being, even though it says regarding him, Vayhi Adam LeNefesh Haya, so it calls a human being a live animal, nevertheless, his laws are not the same as a Haya, because, and is not included in the Lo Ta'aseh, and probably because we do consider its blood, human blood and milk permitted. So you can't say it's the same as non-kosher animals. And therefore, someone who does eat from human flesh or its forbidden fat, or it's in an animal, what would be forbidden fat, whether the person is, whether it's a limb from a live person or from a dead person, would not get lashes, as one would get lashes if you ate pig or something like that. So what is the prohibition? It's asur be'aseh. Sheremana katuv shibat mineh chaya v'amar behen zot hachaya shetochelu. Since the Torah mentions 7 species of hayot that are permitted, and human beings are not one of them. So therefore, anything except for these is a lav haba miklal aseh, which is an aseh. So we can infer from this that human beings are not one of these and therefore are not kosher. Since it says you may eat these, and human being is not included, so the prohibition is actually at a level of misvat aseh. A misvat alav that comes from misvat aseh is a lower level than the misvat lo ta'aseh. So theoretically, if you're on a deserted island with no food and you're going to starve to death, and you can choose to eat your buddy or a pig, the prohibition against pig would be a lower prohibition, theoretically. Okay, so that is absolutely fascinating. In any case, when we come back to this, we see that there is a problem because according to this baraita, human milk is permitted. And up here, we mentioned that I said sheretz before, it's actually sheketz. Sheketz, a non-kosher animal. If after 2 years, then human milk is like nursing from a non-kosher animal. So how could you say that human milk is like a sheketz if this baraita proved that it is permitted? Furthermore, not only is there no biblical prohibition against milk and blood, there's not even a rabbinic prohibition refraining someone from having milk. So it's totally permitted. Why'd you say it's like a sheketz? The answer is la kashya. Ha de parish, ha de la parish. It depends if the milk is separated from the woman's body. If she pumped it into a cup, then it's permitted. But if it was not removed, if one is nursing directly from a woman, then it's permitted for a baby to do, but that would be prohibited. That would be like a sheket. So that's the idea when you have an infant who's under either 2 years old or 4 4 and 5 years old, then it's permitted. There's no problem at all, and that's what this baraita is referring to. There's no problem. Whereas when the rabbis say it's like a sheketz, it's not saying it's actually the same as a sheketz, but that would be a prohibition only when it's coming directly from the mother, which means that an adult who wants to drink pumped milk is permitted. Vechilufa bedam. Now this is the opposite law from blood. Keditanya dam she'al gabe kikar gorero ve'ochlo. If one has human blood on a piece of bread, I don't know, he has a cut and he was touching the bread and there's some blood on the bread, you have to scrape it off, and only then you can eat the rest of it. So you're not allowed to eat blood that came out of the body. Whereas the blood's still within the body, like if someone their gums are bleeding and then he doesn't want to spit it out, he can suck it and swallow it, and there's no problem with that. So you see, blood is the opposite of milk. Milk, if it's detached from the body, then it's permitted to anyone, even an adult. But one cannot, an adult cannot have milk directly from a woman. Whereas for blood, it's the opposite. If the blood's separated from the body, it's prohibited, but if it's directly from the body, it's permitted. This was actually a practical case. My son got all of his wisdom teeth out, and the doctor said he should not spit out. It's bleeds for many hours, and he's not allowed to spit it out because then that will open the wound, but has to swallow it. So that was in fact permitted since it's already in his mouth. He was allowed to swallow it. There's machloket rishonim if this applies to if you have a wound somewhere else, not in your mouth, but on your skin somewhere, and you want to suck the blood. Is that permitted or not? Is a machloket between Rashi and Tosafot here. Okay, Amar Mor Rabbi Yoshua Omer Afilu Arba veChamesh Shanim. So Rabbi Yoshua said even 4 or 5 years. V'hatanya Rabbi Yoshua Omer Afilu Chabilato al Ketefav. Hold on, how could Rabbi Yoshua say 4 or 5 years? In a different braita, Rabbi Yoshua says even if the baby or now toddler is holding a package on his shoulder, he's not old enough to walk and carry a package on his shoulder, still it's permitted for it to nurse. And there's no contradiction. That's about 4 or 5. The kid already can walk and carry something. Amar Rav Yosef, halacha, Rabbi Yoshua, and halacha is like the more lenient opinion of Rabbi Yoshua, that as long as she's continually nursing, a baby is allowed to nurse even till 4 or 5 years old. Tanya Rabbi Mari Nosomer, go neach yonek halav be-Shabbat. He says that if someone is coughing, someone is ill, he can suck milk from an animal's udder, like a goat's udder, directly on Shabbat. This was therapeutic for some kind of disease. To have that warm milk directly, you can do that. Now, the problem is, so first of all, it's permitted during the week. Now, on Shabbat, you're not allowed to milk an animal. That is a problem of dash. Dash is taking the kernel of wheat out of its husk, and so this is a tolada. It's similar in removing milk that's edible from its source. So generally, it would be prohibited to milk an animal on Shabbat. But in this case, where a person is sick, it's permitted. The reason is because if one is sucking it directly from the animal's udder, that is not a usual way of milking an animal. Usually you milk it with your hands. So since you're doing it in an unusual way, that makes it drabanan. And if someone is suffering because they're sick, then the rabbis do not make a gezerah. So therefore it's permitted. And Amar Yosef, halacha, Rabbi Marinos, and in fact, that is the halacha. Tanya, Nachum ish Galia omer, sinor she'alu bo kashkashin mema'ichan beraglo besina b'Shabbat ve'no choshesh. A similar Shabbat law is that if someone has a gutter or drain pipe and has all kinds of weeds, grass in it, and now the water is getting stuck, and it may overflow and come into the roof and cause damage. So you can go and walk on it and crush it as long as it's in private. Now this would be a problem of fixing something. It was broken before, and now you're fixing it. and you can use it as makeh patish. And so even though that generally is prohibited on Shabbat, if it's in private and no one will see you, you can do it. Because this is an unusual way to do it. Usually you'd use a tool to clean it out. Here you're using your feet. So since it's an unusual way, that turns it into a d'Rabbanan. And in the case of loss, where the damage will be caused by this water, if you don't do it, it's permitted. Amar Rav Yosef halacha kenachum ish galya. Rav Yosef says that is the halacha. Perash la'achar 24 chodesh. Now we mentioned that according to Rabbi Yehoshua, who says that even 4 or 5 years, but it has to be continuous. If she stopped nursing after 2 years, then she's not allowed to go back. And if she does, it's like nursing from a non-kosher animal. So the answer is v'chama. How long is considered a break that you then could not go back? 3 days. If a mother, after 2 years, stops nursing her baby for more than 3 days, then she cannot return to nurse it. And others have a different, it's also 3 days, but others say it's not a statement of an Amorah, but rather of a Tana. In the first version, it's Rav Yehuda bar Chaviva said in the name of Shemuel, so Shemuel, the first generation Amorah, said it. In the second version, Rav Yehuda bar Chaviva recited this following Baraita, Taneh, in front of Shemuel, but he's actually quoting a Tanaitic source. This is kind of fascinating that this, what might have been originally a Baraita, was then quoted as Amar Rav Yehuda in the name of Shemuel, or maybe the other way around, we're not sure. But this could be an insight into why sometimes you have a statement of an Amorah, and then Tanya Namehachi, where he says, oh, there's a Baraita that says the exact same words. Well, you see here an example of a case where there's a statement that originated either by Shemuel or a Baraita, but the attribution, just with the word Taneh and the change in the word Amar for Kameh, would change the attribution from a Tanaitic or to Amoraic source or vice versa. Tenor Banan, meneket shemet ba'ala betoch 24 chodesh, harezo lo titares velo tinaseh. If a nursing woman whose husband died within 24 months, so now the baby is completely dependent on this mother, so she is not allowed to remarry. She can't get engaged, she cannot remarry ad 24 chodesh until the 24 months are up from the day that the baby was born, not since the husband died. Dibrei Rabbi Meir, because we want to protect the child, we want to make sure the child gets its nourishment, and it needs that its mother's milk for 2 years, and if she gets remarried, then she may become pregnant. And if she becomes pregnant, then her milk will dry up. The second husband will not have any obligation to feed this baby, and so is not going to necessarily go and find a wet nurse because it's not his baby. Why should he have to pay for it? And she can't nurse it, and so that will put the baby in danger. And therefore, this widow should wait and until her baby is independent and doesn't need her anymore, and only then get remarried. That's what Rabbi Meir says. Rabbi Yehuda matir b'shmona asar chodesh. Rabbi Yehuda says 18 months is enough, not 24. The baby will be okay. Amar Rabbi Natan bar Yosef, hen dibrei bet Shammai, hen dibrei bet Hillel. Rabbi Natan says this machloket between these later Tanaim, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, parallels already a machloket between bet Shammai and bet Hillel. Shebet Shammai omrim 24 chodesh, bet Hillel omrim 18 chodesh. Bet Shammai said widow, even though Bet Shammai said yesterday that a wife does not need to, it's not one of the obligations of a wife to her husband that she needs to nurse her child. But once the child is dependent on the mother and the husband dies, the wife is not allowed to get remarried for 24 months, so he's machmir on it. Bet Hillel says 18 months, like Rabbi Yehuda, or rather Rabbi Yehuda is like Bet Hillel. Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Ani achriya. Rashbag has a decision in this regard. The Divrei Omed 24 chodesh mutet linaseh be-21 chodesh. He says, according to the opinions above that said 24 months, actually, she's already allowed to get married after 21 months. Because, in any case, even if she gets married now, the pregnancy will not develop until 3 months later. And so there's no danger for her milk drying up right at the beginning of pregnancy. So even after 21 months, even if she gets pregnant right away, she still will have a full 24 months of nursing. And according to the one who says that a woman needs 18 months, she can already remarry after 15 months. Because the milk will only spoil after 3 months of pregnancy. All right, who do we follow halacha like? Amar Ula. Halacha Rabbi Yehuda. Halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, who says only is the was more lenient one that says all you need is 18 months. And Morukva said that Rabbi Chanina said that he can, when he had a case, he was allowed to marry such a woman after 15 months. So in other words, following Rabbi Yehuda and Rashbag, that when we say you need 18 months altogether, that means 15 months until you get married. Ariseh de Abaye, Atalekamed Abaye. The sharecropper of Abaye came to Abaye, and he was in exactly this situation. Amar le mahu le'ares b'chamisha chodesh. He wants to marry someone who is nursing a baby, and he said, "Can I do kiddushin after when the baby is 15 months old?" Amar le hada de Rabbi Yehuda halacha Rabbi Yehuda. First of all, we have a general rule that between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda, so that's the more lenient one. And furthermore, we follow Bet Hillel against Bet Shammai, and he's also the one that said 18 months. Ve'amar Ula halacha Rabbi Yehuda, ve'amar Mor Ukva li Rabbi Chanina seta achar 15 chodesh kol sheken da'at le'ares. And he's quoting these two statements here that says the law is like Rabbi Yehuda, and Mor Ukva had such a case, and Rabbi Chanina said you can marry after 15 months. And you, all the more so, you're only trying to do kiddushin, and then you're only going to get married at some point after that. So you're not in danger. You're not going to have a child. She's not going to become pregnant again until after the nisu'in. So all the more so, it's permitted for you. So Abaye said, no problem. Ki ata lekamed Rav Yosef amar le. When Abaye came to his teacher, Rav Yosef, and they were discussing this matter, Rav Yosef said, Ravu Shmuel, Damre Tarvayu Sedicha Lamtin 24 chodesh, Chutz miyom shenolad bo, v'chutz miyom shenitarasa bo. But Rav Shmuel said, we do not follow the lenient opinions for halacha, but rather even more stringent. We have to wait 24 months, and that's not including the day it was born. You have to start counting from the day after it was born, and it's not including the day of Kiddushin, but you have to do Kiddushin the day after the 24 months is finished. And that's talking about Kiddushin, not just Nisu'in. So you have to wait a full 24 months from after the baby is born. So after Abaye heard that, he realized that he gave them a mistaken ruling. So he ran after that tenant farmer to give him the update that actually is prohibited, and he ran either three Persian miles, or some say it was only 1 Persian mile, but it was running in the sand, which is three times more difficult than running on a road. But he was not able to catch up to him, and so he felt bad about that. And now he recognized the wisdom of what the sages said. One should not give a halachic ruling in front of his rabbi. If his rabbi is nearby, then he should go ask the rabbi first and not give a ruling independently, even if it's about a simple matter of like an egg and kutach. Kutach is a dairy a yogurt dish, and even everybody knows an egg, even though an egg comes from a chicken, you're allowed to eat an egg with dairy. So even though this is a simple law that everybody knows, even that, you go double check with your own rabbi first Even if you're Abaye, he should have checked with Rav Yosef first and said, I was double checking. Egg and milk is okay, it's okay, and then only then answer. Not only because it appears disrespectful. If your teacher is around and you go and give halachic rulings, it looks like you're not treating your rabbi with respect. Not only that reason, also because you won't be successful in giving a proper ruling. You'll end up making a mistake, like that happened exactly here. So even though I actually learned this law of Rav and Shemuel, who said you have to wait full 24 months, but at the time that the sharecropper asked, I didn't think of it, and I gave him a wrong answer. And so you see that I should have always checked with Rav Yosef, even though it's something that I actually knew. Double check, because like in this case, he made the wrong call. Tenora banan natna bena lemeneket o gemalatu o met muteret linase miyad. Now there are exceptions to this rule. If a woman is nursing a baby and her husband dies, so she cannot remarry until she finishes nursing. But in this case, what if she gave her child to a wet nurse? So she's not nursing anymore and the child is being taken care of. Or she weaned the child, or the child died. And so in all these cases, she's not nursing anymore. Then she can marry immediately. That's what the Baraita says. Rav Papa and Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua sevu leme'abad ubada ki hamatnita. And Rav Papa and Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yoshua, they learned this braita, and a case happened, and they were going to rule in accordance, or even act in accordance with this very baraita. Amra lehu hahi sabta bedidia va'obada v'asali Rav Nachman. But there was an elder woman there that said, I had an incident exactly like that, and I asked Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman said it's prohibited. So it's related to the tradition before, not only in its content, but also in the theme of sages relying on a tradition, but making a mistake in the ruling. Interestingly, here they realized the mistake based on the testimony of this elder woman. Now, Ini, hold on. What, is this true that it's prohibited? Did Rav Nachman really prohibit it? We know that Rav Nachman, who was close to the house of the exilarch, the person, the Jewish sage in charge of the whole community in Bavel, and he had there was such a case in the house of the Resh Galuta of a woman who was not nursing, and so therefore stopped nursing, and therefore was permitted, or had a wet nurse, as it was permitted, and he permitted her to marry right away. So how come Rav Nachman told this elder woman that she's not allowed? No, the house of the Resh Galuta is different, because Resh Galuta is rich and powerful. So if he hires a wet nurse, the wet nurse is going to be committed and not change her mind. Whereas if a regular person, a woman hires a wet nurse, even if she agrees now, maybe she'll get a better job, or she won't be committed, and so she always has to worry that the wet nurse might leave, and then the mother will have to take care of the baby. And therefore, for most people, they cannot rely on this baraita. For most people, the woman will have to wait until the baby is old enough, and only then would be permitted to remarry. Amalehu Rav Papi, Vatun Latis Beruha Meha de Tanya. Rav Papi told Rav Papa and Rav Huna, the ones that they were going to rely on the lenient ruling in this case, if not that this elder told them not to. But he's asking, like, what were you even thinking? Don't you know this baraita? Detanya, we're going to list a whole bunch of cases where a husband and wife, although married, were not together, and so there's no possibility that she was pregnant. Like if she ran to her father's house, she liked being home better, or there was anger in her husband's house, so they were not getting along, and they were basically separated. Or if the husband was in jail, or he went away on a long trip, or the husband was old or sick and impotent, or if she was barren, or she was elderly, ailonit, or never developed, uktana, or she was a minor, or if she miscarried after her husband died. So in all these cases, there's no way that she's pregnant. Or she cannot have a child. Now, usually there's a law that if a woman is divorced or widowed, she has to wait 3 months to get remarried. We're talking about when they don't have a baby. And she has to wait 3 months so that we can determine fatherhood. In case she was pregnant from the previous marriage, and if she gets married before 3 months and now she becomes pregnant, we won't know if she became pregnant from the second husband or if this is still a pregnancy from the first husband. So wait 3 months until she would be showing and we would know. So this is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, that even though in all these cases there's no way she can be pregnant, we still apply the law across the board. Since for most women, they can be pregnant, so we make them wait 3 months, even if in your particular case there's no way that this woman is pregnant, we still apply it across the board. Now there's another opinion. Rabbi Yosef permits in all these cases because there's no way she's pregnant. But halacha follows Rabbi Meir when he makes a gezerah, and so these gezerot, that would be the halacha against Rabbi Yosef. What we see here is that the law follows the stringent opinion that we do not make any difference. We make the same law across the board and have to wait 3 months. So too, in a case where a woman has a child, has an infant, we should, and so therefore they have to wait. Until the baby is weaned. That should apply across the board, even if she hired a wet nurse. It wouldn't matter. So how come it up upon Avunat? Didn't you know this baraita? And we followed Rabbi Meir, and we do not make exceptions to a rule once you have a rule, and therefore you should have been stringent and waited. Why did you think that you could follow this lenient baraita? And so, Amrile lav adatin. So they answered him, "You're right. It was not on our it was not on our mind. We didn't think of the relevance of this baraita. So we're attacking Rav Huna and Rav Papa and Rav Huna, the son of Yoshua. We already rejected them and then reject them again. They're like, okay, you're right. It was a mistake." Okay. Vehilcheta met mutar gemalatu asur. The bottom line is, if the baby died, then there's really no chance. That's it. There is no chance that it's going to need any milk again, so she can get married right away. But if the mother weaned him, but it's before the time, maybe the weaning is premature, and the baby actually will become weak and will need to be nursed, and so she really has to wait for the full term, however long that is. Mor bar Rav Asher Amar, afilu met nami asudima katla le ve'azla umin nasaba. Mor bar Rav Asher says, even in the case where the baby died, still we should prohibit her from remarrying, because if we permit her to remarry earlier, then we have to worry maybe this mother will kill her baby so that she can marry right away and not have to wait 24 months. And in fact, there was an actual case where a woman did so. She strangled her child so she could get married right away. But we reject that. In that case, that woman was insane. That's not a usual case. Women are not going to strangle their children for any reason, and certainly not just so that they can get married a few months earlier than otherwise they would be permitted to. So therefore, a woman whose child died is permitted to remarry right away. If a woman is given a child to nurse, she's hired as a wet nurse, she may not nurse her own child along with the one that she's hired to, and not the child of another woman. In other words, if she is hired to nurse a child, she has to devote herself exclusively to that child. Otherwise, she may not have enough milk for 2 babies and then not give sufficient nourishment to the one that she's hired for. Paska kim'a ochelet harbe lo tochel imo devarim hara'im lehalab. Furthermore, if the parents, the father, decided a small amount of allowance for her food because she needs to eat extra now as she's nursing the child, then even though he only gave her a small amount, she has to eat a lot. She has to make sure to eat and drink sufficiently that she'll have plenty of milk for the child. And she should also not eat things that will be bad for her milk. She has to take care of herself and be healthy. There's a similar idea now when you have a surrogate mother. Part of being a surrogate mother, she can't go smoke and drink. She has to keep healthy in order to keep the health of the child that she's carrying. Okay, hashta bena amat lo ben chabretami ba'ya. We have a question on this braita. If she cannot, she's not allowed to nurse her own child together with the client's child, then all the more so she would not be allowed to nurse someone else's child. Why do you even have to say that? Isn't that obvious? No, we might have thought, you have to say it, because you might have thought that her own child, that she loves a lot, so she's going to give more milk to her own child, and that will be at the deficit of the one that she's hired for. And so maybe only that's not allowed. But maybe her friend's child, who she's agreeing to nurse for free, if not that she had extra, she would not give him anything. She's going to prioritize the one that she's hired for rather than one that she's helping out for free. And so I might have thought that her friend's child would be permitted. So therefore this comes to teach that whether it's her own or a favor she's doing as a friend, once she's hired, is not allowed to nurse any of them. If she has her own child, then she can't take the job. And she can't help out a friend either. She has to devote her milk exclusively to whoever she is hired to feed. Paska kim'a ochelet harbe. Braita mentioned that even if the family gives her only a small amount, she has to go and eat a lot. Mecha, where's she going to get a lot of food if they only gave her money for a little food? She has to bring it from her own funds because she agreed to nurse the child. So included that is that she will have to take care of herself in any way that she needs to. And the Braita further said, don't eat bad food. What's some examples of food that is bad for milk? Amarav Kana kegon keshut vehaziz vedagim ketanim ve'adama, hops and young green grains and small fish and soil. I don't know why people would eat soil. Abaye amar afilu kara vehabusha. Abaye says pumpkins and quince. Papa amar afilu kara vechufra, pumpkins and palm branches. Rav Ashi amar afilu kamka veharsena. Even this kutach, this sour cream, yogurt, spoiled milk with croutons dish and fried fish, all these are not good. Minayhu paske halba, minayu achre halba. Some of them cause the milk to dry up, some of them cause the milk to taste bad. Dim shammesha beda haya. Now once we're talking about advice, here's some other related advice. Havula bene nichpe. If a couple engages in intercourse in a mill, where a mill is very shaky, then they're going to have epileptic children who are going to have seizures because like the mill that's very shaky. If they have relations on the ground, they'll have long-necked children. If they have relations, if a woman steps on a donkey's dung when pregnant, she'll have bald children. Not sure what the connection is. So more about a woman's diet when she's pregnant. If she eats mustard, the kids will be gluttonous. If she eats garden cress, then they will cry. The kids will cry. If she eats brine, fish brine, then the kids will have blinking eyes, I guess like fish have small eyes. Ta'achla gargushta havula bene mecho are. If she eats soil, she'll have ugly children. Deshatya shichra havula bene ukame. If she drinks liquor, then she'll have dark children. Ta'achla bisra v'shatya chamra havula bene. If she has meat and drinks wine, however, these are good things, and she will have healthy children. Ta'achla be'ay. If she has eggs, havula bene einane. She'll have large-eyed children, like eggs are big. Ta'achla, in similar shape. Ta'achla kavre havula bene chinane. If she eats big fish, not the small fried fish, she'll have graceful children. Ta'achla karpasa havula bene ziv tane. If she eats celery, she'll have beautiful children. Ta'achla kusbarta havula bene bisrane. If she eats coriander, she'll have nice plump children. If she eats etrogim, then her children will smell beautiful. And we have such a case, Berate de Shavor Malka, the daughter of the Persian king Shavor Malka, ate etrogim while she was pregnant. Achla ba'ima etrogam v'havu maseke la lekame abu beresh rechane. And they would put her in front of her father, and she was better smelling than all of the wonderful Persian spices. So that's a good smell, because the Persians were famous for their good spices. But this child smelled better than all of them. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.